My spectacles shot off my face and slid across the polished oak of Silvercrest Hall as 130 guests fell into a stunned, breathless silence. I could hear the tiny screech of metal against wood long after everything else went quiet. The sting on my cheek broke hot across my skin, but it was nothing compared to the raw ache blooming in my chest. My new daughter-in-law, my son's bride, had struck me on her wedding day, because I would not hand her the keys to my apartment. "That's what you get for being so selfish," Sabrina shouted, her voice bright with triumph and trembling with rage. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." My right hand rose in a reflex I didn't recognize, half defense, half disbelief, and fell uselessly back to my side. My glasses came to rest by a column draped in white chiffon. I could see my own reflection in the floor's small, older, bent just slightly as if that one gesture had folded me down the middle. I crouched to collect my glasses with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The hinges had twisted, one lens was spiderwebbed with fractures. Around me, the silence changed shape. Guests cleared their throats, looked down, stared at their shoes. A few turned away as though they'd been caught eavesdropping. A murmur rose behind my back, hushed, brittle, hungry. And my son, Noah, stared at the parquet as if it were a cliff's edge and one wrong blink would send him over. Not a word from his lips. Not even my name. "You're not welcome here anymore," Sabrina announced, smoothing the flat front of her exquisite ivory gown as though discipline and beauty might be the same thing. "No, and I need our own space to begin our life. Your apartment is perfect for us while we look for something appropriate." Her voice dripped sugar and steel. I had listened to that tone for months as she critiqued my jacket, my car, my volunteer hours at the flower shop down the street. My weakness, to her, was an aesthetic offense. My quiet life, a problem to be solved. I stood slowly, cradling my ruined glasses in one hand, pressing my palm against my throbbing cheek with the other. I knew precisely when something inside me shifted. It wasn't a grand cracking open. It was small and cool and decisive, like the click of a latch. I felt years of secrecy, the camouflage I'd worn with purpose, drop like a shawl from my shoulders. I had chosen my portrait for the world, and it had been gray and plain and safe. For decades I had kept parts of myself tucked out of sight, even from my son. I'd believed that caution shielded us. I had been wrong. I slid my broken glasses into my old leather purse and moved through the crowd toward the exit, my back straight, my breathing steady with work. The air in Silvercrest Hall was chilled, but there was heat in my ribs, a kind of bell-ringing intensity, as if a century of small doors inside me had swung open at once. Behind me, the murmurs followed like smoke. "Poor thing. She looks so fragile," someone whispered. "She shouldn't be living alone anymore," another voice added, threaded with false concern. "Honestly, the bride is right." Their pity burned more sharply than Sabrina's hand. Out in the corridor, light pooled against the carpet. I didn't pause. I pushed through the glass doors and walked straight into the night. The parking lot was lit by tall lamps, each casting its own silver halo. My car sat where I'd left it, an aging sedan the color of river stone. I unlocked it, slid inside, and shut the door. For a full beat I simply held the steering wheel, palms flat, eyes closed. The quiet was absolute, except for the thump of my own pulse. Then I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in over a year. "Adrian," I said, and heard my voice steadier than I felt. "It's Evelyn Hart. I need you at Silvercrest Hall right now. Bring the packet. All of it." On the other end, a silence waited with comprehension. Adrian Cole had been my financial and legal advisor, and the last living friend my husband trusted wholeheartedly. "Mrs. Hart," he replied, professional and concerned. "Once we do this, you know there's no unringing the bell." I opened my eyes. Through the windshield, the hall glowed gold and full of music. I could just make out Sabrina's silhouette by the windows, a spill of veil and movement, guests gathering around her like moths. "I'm certain," I said, then set the phone on the passenger seat and exhaled a piece of my old life into the dark. 30 minutes, I told myself. 30 minutes for a life to flip inside out, for facades to blister and expose the beams beneath. 30 minutes for a woman to choose dignity over love's counterfeit. Waiting. My mind flooded with images as if someone had loosened a valve at the base of my skull. 2.5 years earlier, Noah had brought Sabrina to my apartment for the first time. I'd set plates on my little table, black tea in a pot, a loaf studded with apricots. The door swung open and there she was, sleek hair, a dove, gray dress, heels barely whispering against my floorboards. She greeted me and then let her gaze wander, taking in my second-hand armoire, the thrift store lamp, the worn kitchen tile. How quaint, she'd said, and I had watched the corners of her mouth stiffen, as if she'd tasted something slightly sour. It was a look I would come to know well. She took 2 bites of dinner and pushed her plate away. She asked polite questions about my volunteer hours at the flower shop, about my car, about whether I'd ever considered moving to a community with services for seniors. When I asked about her family, her answers were evasive, generic. When I mentioned my widow's pension, she leaned in a shade too closely. On so little, she said softly, her tone a performance of compassion. You're very brave. It must be hard to get by. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been my life. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 68. Until that night, most people believed I lived exactly the way I appeared to, modestly, frugally, in the same 2-bedroom apartment where my husband passed away 8 years ago. I volunteer 3 days a week at a flower shop because flowers still make me believe in good endings. I drive a 10-year-old sedan. I buy my jackets on sale. I keep my nails short and clean, for the world, especially for Sabrina. That was the whole picture. It never has been. Before Thomas died, he and I agreed on a way to live that suited us, not anyone's expectations. Visible wealth draws eyes we don't want, he used to say. Invisible wealth buys us silence and choice. He'd built an import business from the ground up. He was careful and quiet and shrewd in the ways that matter. We made our decisions together. And when he got sick, we vowed one more time to never let money be the story people tell about us. I didn't expect the story to devour us anyway. Every visit from Sabrina after that first night felt like a kindness I had to brace myself against. She'd sweep in with a magazine tucked beside her ribs, leave it on the coffee table. A place for mom, senior living, happy retirement. And then make a show of not pressuring me. Just options. She'd chirp, tapping a glossy page. Some of these places have pickleball courts and art classes and on-site medical care. Think of the peace of mind. In time, she stopped pretending it was about me. A condo your size is too much for one person. She told me at dinner 3 months before the wedding, swirling a glass of wine I'd paid for. It would give us a chance to start fresh. No, and I want to start a family soon. We can't do that from a 1-bedroom. Noah's eyes slid toward mine, then away. The boy who once told me everything had learned the adult habit of silence. Not long afterward, I overheard Sabrina in my kitchen whispering into her phone. She didn't see me pausing in the hallway to steady my hands with the edge of the wall. Yes, Mom, she murmured. It's the good part of the city, too. If I can nudge her to downsize, we can stay there while we look for something better. She'll probably even thank us. She's sweet like that. I stood still until my heartbeat settled. When she came back out, I smiled. She smiled back. We proceeded like a pair of women playing a game with antique rules. No open warfare, no loud words, all strategy. Noah began parroting her script soon after. Mom, maybe Sabrina's right, he said, picking imaginary lint from his cuff. A smaller place could be easier. We just want you safe. Lear, I wanted to say, not about the safe part, about the we. Neither of them wanted safety for me. They wanted security for themselves. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sabrina arrived at my home with her parents in tow. I had not been warned. "We should talk about your future," her mother said, drawing her cardigan tighter, eyes roving over my framed photographs and potted herbs and landline phone, as if she were appraising a property she already owned. Her father, a big man who believed in his own gravity, sat forward on my sofa. "At your age," he began, "living alone invites trouble. We found a senior residence with 24-hour staff, a dining hall, group activities. Pickleball?" I asked, not unkindly. His mouth twitched. He didn't understand I was laughing to keep from crying. "With the sale of this place," Sabrina's father continued, sliding a folder from his briefcase, "you could cover years of care. And there would be money left for, well, for starters. For my son," I supplied. No one contradicted me. Noah sat on the edge of a dining chair, palms flat, wearing the expression of a man bracing for weather. "Mom," he said in a voice that didn't sound like him, "we've been worrying. It's time to think long-term. Appropriate for my age," I repeated low and even. "And if I say no?" They exchanged glances that tasted rehearsed. "Would hate to involve outsiders," Sabrina's mother said, folding her hands with delicate precision. "But if your judgment seems impaired, the court can help appoint someone to guide your decisions." The threat was airless. There it was, naked and unadorned, in my living room, their intention to strip my life for parts and call it help. My son didn't disagree. He didn't speak at all. They left with nothing more from me than a closed door. After the latch clicked, I sat at the dining table in the dark, and wept like I had not wept since Thomas took his last breath in our bed. I didn't cry for my housing. I cried for my son's soul, for the part of him I didn't recognize, for the way greed can wear love's clothes and trick even the clever into feeding it. That same night, I called Adrian. "I need an audit of Noah and Sabrina's finances." I told him, my voice raw. "Everything. Debts, income, liabilities. I want to know what we are actually dealing with." It took a week. The picture he brought me had no shadows. Noah's salary barely kept him above water. Sabrina's part-time, umage consulting, brought in little and cost a fortune in its own maintenance. Credit cards were maxed. Their rental payments were behind. They were financing champagne lives on tap, water budgets, and calling it the future. And there was one piece that cracked something inside me. I'm not sure we'll ever heal the same way. For the past 6 months, my son had called banks asking about loans, backed by elderly parents' properties. He'd asked strangers how to obtain power of attorney, if mental competency was questioned. He'd rehearsed a script with customer service representatives that ended with my hands tied. It would have been one thing if Sabrina alone had steered them here. But this wasn't a single person's plan. It was a duet. My boy had chosen his role. On the surface, I made no changes. Underneath, I began to prepare. I asked Adrian for documents, cancellations, suspensions, legal notices. I met with Alina Morales, an old friend who still worked in real estate. She confirmed what I already knew. "They came by your building with a man carrying a tape measure," she told me. They were making plans. The morning after the suffocating family meeting, I took a long walk with Walter, my neighbor across the hall. Walter is 70. His laugh fills our corridor like spring. He said the thing I hadn't managed to say to myself: "Your kindness isn't the problem. Their appetite is." Now, sitting in my car in the cool night air, outside a wedding that had just splintered into something else, I called Walter. "Can you grab the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk?" I asked. "The one with the old string tie. Please. Bring it down to the lot. Don't let anyone see." There was no need to explain. Walter had watched the parade of visits, the way Sabrina's voice sharpened in my hallway when she thought no one was listening, the way Noah took calls by the elevator. He had noticed how I stood taller after I spoke to Adrian, and sank a little after I spoke to my son. Walter arrived 5 minutes later with the folder, hugged to his chest the way one carries something precious. As soon as I touched it, I felt Thomas's palm over mine. A breeze passed over the hood of the car. I opened the folder with careful hands. The first sheet, an investment statement with a number that would buy 10 of my apartment building, with enough left over to fund a scholarship for every kid on my block. The second, the deed to a small, unimposing office building downtown whose monthly rental income could feed a family of 10. The third, the title to a beach house that had become an annual retreat for family friends whose names I would protect until the grave. There were others, funds, bonds, a portfolio built slowly and quietly under Thomas's careful eye and my equal will. I keep the flower shop job, because the scent of peonies in a cold room makes me feel more alive than almost anything else. I drive my old sedan because it is faithful, and because I like the way quiet wealth feels. An invisible life powered by intention. If Sabrina had dug for a treasure chest under my living room rug, she would have found dust and brass tacks and laughed. The irony is that my apartment, the holy grail of her ambition, was the least valuable asset I owned. There were more papers in the folder that made my fingers tremble. For the past 3 years, I had been quietly propping up Noah's life. His rent, his car insurance, his credit card payments, transfers he chalked up to bonuses or unexpected refunds had slid from my accounts to his. In my mind, I had been buying him time to grow into himself. In reality, I had been underwriting a transformation I did not recognize. $4,500 every month. Small amounts, each justifiable, none of them in isolation ruinous. In total, enough to teach a son he lived under a net that would always catch him. I closed my eyes. I pictured Thomas, shaking his head, not in judgment, but in that way he had, observing the truth while choosing his next kindest move. I placed the folder on the passenger seat beside my phone. I stared toward the hall, where music floated through the cracked, open windows, a festive song suddenly menacing. So many times I had imagined standing at Noah's wedding with tears of a mother's ordinary joy. I had never once pictured standing outside, counting minutes and putting on the mask of a different kind of mother altogether. Headlights swept across my windshield, a dark sedan pulling into the open space to my left. Adrian emerged, coat sharp, expression steady. He crossed the pavement with purpose, nodding to Walter as they passed each other. Mrs. Hart, he said softly. Are you sure? I am, I answered, and the conviction in my voice surprised even me. He opened his briefcase and showed me the first set of documents. This one suspends all monthly transfers to Noah Hart, he said. This one cancels your confidential guarantor status on his lease. This one revokes your financial guarantee for the wedding event. I held each sheet the way one holds something both fragile and final. And the will? I asked. My heart did not drop. It had already fallen and hit floor and formed into something else. He handed me another legal package, neatly tabbed. An amended version, he said. It redirects assets to charities of your choosing, pending your final notarized signature, which I brought, and preserves a trust with conditions you and I discussed last year. I took the pen he offered. My hand didn't shake. I signed with my full name, the way Thomas loved to see it, not just Evelyn, but Evelyn May Hart. I wrote myself across the page as if I were reclaiming the syllables from every time I'd said yes to a demand I should have met with a door. Adrian, I said, when the last signature was done. This isn't revenge. I know, he replied. This is stewardship. He tucked the papers back inside the folder and closed the clasp. Come with me, I said, feeling the old Evelyn's caution look me up and down, and step aside to make room for the woman I had always been underneath her. We're going back in. We walked side by side toward the entrance, the night air cool against my fresh bruise. I could hear the music building as we drew close, a drumline like the inside of my ribs. The lobby doors parted. The world we'd left just minutes ago waited, unaware, for its pulse to change. As we stepped into the ballroom, conversation snapped like a string, heads turned. The band faltered, then fell quiet. It seemed impossible that this was the same room I had been flung from not long ago. A place that had held my humiliation like a trophy and kept on dancing around it. Sabrina saw me first. Her smile froze. "What are you doing back?" she called out, brittle brightness coating each word. "Haven't you caused enough trouble?" Noah looked up, eyes blowing wide. Fear and recognition crossed his face at the same time. The terrible comprehension that something important had moved while he wasn't looking. Adrian set his briefcase on a nearby table and clicked the latches open. Adrian rested one hand on the open briefcase, then looked up, his voice carrying the clear, measured tone of a man accustomed to tense rooms. "Good evening," he said. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Adrian Cole, legal and financial advisor to Mrs. Evelyn Hart. I have urgent matters to discuss with Mr. Noah Hart and Mrs. Sabrina Reed." A hush, different from the stunned silence after the slap, spread like frost across the room. People shifted, phones appeared in palms. A few of Sabrina's friends exchanged bright, electric looks, as if they could feel a story forming under their shoes. "What is this?" Sabrina demanded, laugh, tinned and brittle. "This is our wedding," and she came back with a lawyer. "Evelyn, truly, how far are you going to go for attention?" "Enough," I said softly, just to myself, as much a benediction as a boundary. Noah started toward us, face pale as the linens on the head table. He glanced at Adrian's papers as if they might explode. "Mom," he said, voice breaking along the edge. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago," I replied. Adrian pulled out the first document and spoke as if he were reading the weather. "No, Hart. I am delivering notice that the confidential guarantor on your lease, Mrs. Hart, has revoked her guarantee effective immediately. Your landlord will be notified in the morning." Noah blinked. "My guarantor," he repeated, stupid with shock, or pretending to be to spare himself the humiliation of comprehension. "What do you?" "The monthly transfers of $4,500 from Mrs. Hart to your accounts." Adrian continued, reaching for the second document, "are permanently suspended. This includes coverage for credit cards, car insurance, and assorted expenses." The room exhaled in one confused wave. Sabrina laughed, too loudly. "That's absurd," she scoffed. "Evelyn doesn't have that kind of money. She volunteers at a flower shop, for God's sake. She drives a dustbin with wheels. Stop embarrassing yourself." Adrian didn't flinch. He lifted the final paper from the first stack. "The financial guarantee Mrs. Hart provided for this event is withdrawn," he announced with crisp precision. "Per the contract, full payment is due before services may continue." It hit like thunder against crystal. Some guests glanced toward the doors as if the exit had become magnetic. A deep voice cleared his throat near the back. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, face composed, eyes intent. "I'm Raj Patel, General Manager of Silvercrest Hall," he said, and nodded to me in recognition. "Mrs. Hart and I discussed this facility's policies during planning. If the guarantee is revoked, another must replace it. Otherwise, by contract, we pause services until payment is arranged." Sabrina's gaze leaped between me, Adrian, and Mr. Patel. "You can't do this," she spat. "You can't ruin my wedding." I turned to her. "Sabrina," I said, keeping my tone even and my back straight despite the throbbing heat in my cheek. "I didn't ruin your wedding. You put your hands on your husband's mother because I wouldn't give you the keys to my home. You did that all by yourself." Noah took a half step forward. "Mom." I held up a hand. "No, Noah. You stood there and watched. You said nothing." He swallowed. "I didn't know," he whispered, as if ignorance were a bandage. "You didn't want to know," I answered. Then I turned to Adrian. "Continue." He lifted a stapled packet, his voice steady. "Over the last 36 months, Mrs. Hart has contributed a total of $162,000 to the living expenses of Mr. Hart and Ms. Reed. These funds covered rent, credit cards, car insurance, and miscellaneous costs, including portions of the wedding budget. If the earlier murmur had been a hush gathering itself, this one was a gust audible, rippling, made of disbelief and fascination, and the first sharp pricks of embarrassment, pricking the couple at the center of it all. Sabrina's mother, who had remained seated like a lacquered figure, stood. "I'm certain we can resolve this," she said with a smile taut as ribbon, her gaze flicking from me to Adrian to Mr. Patel, calculating. A private conversation would be. "This began in public," I said, turning to look her in the eyes. "It will end in public." Sabrina shook her head so hard her veil trembled. "This is insane," she said, voice rising. "You're an old woman living on fumes. Where would you even get the money?" "By not spending it on things that rot," I replied. "By choosing a quiet life over an expensive one. By listening to my husband when he said, 'Invisible wealth buys you choices when you most need them.'" Noah's face changed. Some combination of understanding and dread. "You," he swallowed, voice breaking. "You've been, all this time?" "Yes," I said. "And I thought I was helping you grow up with grace rather than with bruises. I see now I was helping you forget how to stand." Adrian lifted the last packet. "One more item," he said, not unkindly. "Mrs. Hart has executed a new will. Any assets previously designated for Mr. Hart are now directed to organizations that protect older adults from financial exploitation, with specific allocations to legal aid, housing stabilization, and elder advocacy. She has also created one trust with conditions that are not relevant here." It took a full breath for the words to settle. Then Sabrina's father moved, big and stiff and invested. "Now, look," he began, palms out like a man cajoling a crowd after a car accident. "It's a family matter, and you are humiliated, I understand, but—" "What you understand," I said, "is that a plan you were part of is collapsing. You walked into my home with folders and a script. You discussed my future, as if it were an acquisition. You threatened me with incompetence if I didn't cooperate. You treated me like an obstacle to your daughter's convenience." His mouth opened. Closed. There was nothing left for him to say that wouldn't reveal the truth more starkly. "Mr. Patel glanced toward the band, then back at us. "Folks," he said gently but firmly, "we do need to address the payment situation. Our team is ready to resume service when we have an approved arrangement." Noah's shoulders slumped as if someone cut a string. "Mom," he said again, and his voice had the tremor of the child he once was, "please. There are pictures. Guests. This is supposed to be a happy night." "It could have been," I answered. "It should have been. I dreamed of a happy night for you more times than I can count. But happiness founded on theft is a fever that always breaks." Sabrina stared at me, then at the papers, then at the people holding their breath. The room had become a mirror, and she was seeing herself in it for the first time. "Mr. Cole," she said sharply, "you can't read my finances to a room of strangers." Adrian smiled a small, cool smile. "I have no reason to," he said. "This is not your day in court. It is your day to stop calling the truth a tantrum." For a second, no one spoke. Then from a table near the back, a chair scraped the floor. A young woman stood. Dark hair. Eyes red-rimmed. She looked at me like she knew me and had known me her whole life. "Aunt Evie," she called, voice wobbling, "do you want me to come up with you?" Nora. I hadn't seen her tucked behind a column. My sister's daughter, who had never once treated me as anything other than precisely who I am. I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. Not this part." She understood and sat back down, lips pressed together, hands folded on the table as if to keep them from flying where her heart already was. Adrian closed the briefcase with a soft click. I looked at my son. He was breathing shallow, trying to make the world slow down long enough to rearrange it back to the shape he liked. "There's a way out," I told him quietly, "but it doesn't go through me." Sabrina looked at Mr. Padel, desperation now messy across her face. "We'll pay," she cried, half sob, half declaration. "We have. There's." She fumbled for her clutch, dug for a card, knowing and not knowing at the same time. Padel's gaze didn't soften. "What can run any card you offer?" he said gently. "But we will need it now." Noah stared at the polished floor, a man rehearsing defeat. Then he looked up and found me. "Are you really doing this?" he asked, small, lost. "I already did," I answered. Adrian lifted his briefcase. The room exhaled without knowing how to fill its lungs again. I turned to go, and as I moved toward the exit, I felt the strangest sensation, not triumph, not even relief. It felt like quiet. The kind that follows a storm. The kind that lets you hear your own name. We had nearly reached the doors when Nora stepped into our path, moving quickly, her face open and stricken. "Aunt Evie," she whispered. "I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know." If I had. I pulled her into a hug. "I know," I said into her hair. "You're not part of this." She let me go with reluctance, then glanced over my shoulder at Noah, at Sabrina, at the whole tableau we were leaving behind. "I'm so sorry," she said, to me and to something larger than both of us. "Mustard. Cole," Mr. Patel said as we reached the threshold. "Please send the formal notice to my office tonight." "Of course," Adrian replied. We walked into the corridor, then the lobby, then the cooling night, each threshold a boundary shared between a life and what comes after. 3 days later, my apartment sounded like a war room and smelled like cinnamon. Walter had developed a ritual: overnight coffee in paper cups, cinnamon rolls in a white box from the bakery 2 blocks down, steady companionship. He sat by my window with the sunrise on his face and said, "Evelyn, I want to be very clear, I am with you." The phone had been ringing since dawn. I stopped checking the caller ID. Noah's voicemails began angry, turned pleading, then, finally, ugly. Sabrina's texts were a sequence of exclamation points and insults and half-baked plans. Her parents came to my door twice and left with nothing but the sound of my deadbolt in their ears. Adrian arrived mid-morning. His suit jacket over his arm, he placed a folder on my table and spoke with the gentle efficiency he used for bad news. "Evie," he began, and it was the first time he'd used my nickname in years. "I promised truth. Here it is." He laid it out. The landlord had served notice. The ballroom had filed to recover immediate payment. Their cards had been declined. Noah's employer had requested a conversation about personal conduct in public and reputational risk. I didn't ask what would come of it. I didn't have to. "And their plan B?" I asked, because I already knew there was one. Adrian's jaw tightened. "They filed a preliminary petition yesterday," he said, "a request for an evaluation of your competency to manage your own affairs." Walter swore under his breath, soft and sincere. "They gathered statements from wedding guests," Adrian continued. "Some who didn't see the slap. Some who arrived after. Some who find it convenient to remember the story as a scene you staged to humiliate a bride." I inhaled slowly, let the breath out. I thought of the slap, the sound of metal on wood, the taste of nothing in my mouth. Then I turned toward Walter. "Do you remember what you said to me after the rehearsal dinner?" I asked him. He smiled without mirth. "That their appetite was the problem, not your kindness." "Right," I said. "And appetite keeps eating if you keep feeding it." Walter nodded. "Then let's starve it." That afternoon, Elena stopped by with a sheaf of papers and a face like thunder. "They brought an appraiser around your building 2 weeks ago," she said. "No appointment. No courtesy call. I've spoken with your neighbors. Sabrina's been stopping by, telling people you're confused. Planting seeds. She told the super to call her if you started to wander." Anger moved through me, clean and cold. It clarified rather than clouded. "Thank you," I said to Elena. "For facts, not whispers." Nora came that evening wearing jeans and a navy sweater, her hair caught in a hurried bun. She had a brown envelope in her hands and nerves in her eyes. "I didn't want to upset you," she said, "but I think you should see this." She pulled out a stack of printed screenshots. Posts from strangers who had been guests of guests. Quick videos shot at angles that told more truth than the captions. They showed Sabrina's hand rising and my glasses flying. They showed me steady as a post while Adrian read. They showed Mr. Patel speaking calmly and professionally. They showed Noah stumbling over his quiet excuses. They showed, and this felt like grace, they showed my control, and underneath them, thousands of comments from people who recognized stories like mine as if they were reading their own diaries. "I'm saving all of it," Nora said. "For the lawyer, but also because it helps to know all these people saw what really happened." Adrian returned the next day with a different kind of folder and a different kind of face. "I've retained elder law specialists," he said. "A team. We have an evidentiary package ready, videos, witness statements, the police report documenting the slap and your medical exam. I've included Dr. Lynn's assessment. She will testify to your capacity. I've asked a former judge to review how their petition was filed. It's sloppy. It won't stand." I slept that night for the first time in months. The hearing never even made it out of preliminary review. The judge asked a few narrowly targeted questions, reviewed our packet, and dismissed the petition with a reprimand. The phrase, "bad faith," entered the record like a gavel that wanted to be a sermon. The court ordered them to pay my legal fees. It wasn't much compared to what they owed other people, but it was a line drawn by someone new. Noah didn't call me after the dismissal. Sabrina did, once with threats, "We will appeal," once with tears, "I'm just trying to build a family," once with a photograph, an ultrasound, grainy and gray, a tiny pulse that made bile rise in my throat and tears sting my eyes at the same time. You don't get to use a baby as a crowbar, I thought. Not on me. 6 months after the wedding, Diane Collins called. Her producer did, technically, but it was Diane's voice that met me in the green room on a day I won't forget until forgetting is the kindest thing my mind can do for me. "Mrs. Hart," she said, warm and steady, "thank you for trusting us with this." The show was called Turning Points. The set was simple chairs, soft light, a backdrop that looked like dawn. I sat with my hands folded, the bruise long gone, the steadiness of the choice still inside me like bone. "Evelyn," Diane began, the first name a kind of respect, "your story has traveled far. Why tell it here? Now?" "Because I want the next woman to have words I didn't have," I said. "The ones that stop you from apologizing for breathing." We talked about Thomas and invisible wealth. We talked about Sabrina's performances and Noah's silences. We talked about the moment the hand hit my face, and how oddly freeing it felt to have something to point to and say, "Here. This is the line. You crossed it. Do you have a message for your son?" Diane asked as the red light of the camera glowed steady. I looked straight into it as if I could thread my voice through the lens and nodded around Noah's heart. "Yes," I said. "Noah, I love you because I am your mother. That love is not up for negotiation. But access to me is. Kindness does not mean surrender. Being your mother does not mean letting you hurt me. My door isn't locked forever, but I won't open it until you can knock as the person I raised you to be, not the person greed made you." Deanne's eyes shone. The crew was quiet. When the red light went dark, the room exhaled, a soft tide. The legal case against me collapsed. The internet did what the internet sometimes does when it is at its best. It chose the truth. Noah lost his job. His boss told him the company needed fewer public problems, not more. Sabrina tried to launch a brand. It withered on contact. They moved in with her parents in a 2-bedroom that couldn't house all their grievances. When their cards stopped swiping, they learned how to count the days until payday and how to say no. In the grocery store when the baby wanted things. A letter came from the ballroom's attorneys. They had won their case for the unpaid fee. Another came from a credit card company. Another from a bank. Adrian forwarded them to the appropriate file and sent me copies stamped with dates like closure. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. And when my heart trembled, it wasn't pity. It was the pang we feel when we see someone we love learn the hardest way the lesson we tried to teach them gently. In that same period, Nora began visiting every Saturday morning. We ate eggs in my kitchen and walked to the farmer's market and talked about 1,000 things that had nothing to do with Noah or Sabrina. Sometimes, though, she asked me one question that mattered. Do you regret anything? Yes, I said once, frankly. I regret shielding your cousin from consequences until his bones forgot how to carry his own weight. What would you do differently? She asked. Small no's earlier. I answered. Tiny boundaries like stitches before the wound got wider. And now? Nora tilted her head. And now I'm learning that a late boundary is still a boundary, I said. And I'm not too old to stitch. 2 years have passed since the night 130 people watched the surface of my life rip open and reveal the supports beneath. I am 70 now. My mornings begin with tea on the balcony and a call with Sofia Delgado, the coordinator of the Evelyn Hart Foundation for Senior Dignity, which still feels like a name that belongs to someone braver than me. We started with the proceeds from my revised estate plan and the first rounds of donations that arrived after the television interview. We expected to counsel a few dozen families. We built intake forms and hired a single attorney, and partnered with a social worker who split her time with the county. It grew like a city out of rain. 23 new cases this week, Sophia tells me this morning, her voice equal parts gentle and steel. Patterns hold. Adult children asking for deeds. Grandchildren withholding visits for money. Neighbors noticing bruises that started as words. We've helped more than 400 older adults assert their rights and reclaim their names from family members who tried to replace them with labels like confused or generous or selfish. Whenever those labels served the person speaking, we've trained first responders and bank tellers to spot red flags. Adrian joined us as head of financial strategy and brought friends who knew how to follow money the way a hound follows a scent. Elena leads our real estate triage team. Walter is our vice chair and our happiest warrior. At 72, he runs on espresso and indignation and says things like, "We will make the wolves think twice before they circle this building." Dr. Lynn says I am 10 years lighter in my sleep. Blood pressure steady, migraines gone, posture improved. Bodies tell the truth even when mouths won't. She smiles, tapping the chart. Yours says you chose yourself. I still have dirt under my nails most afternoons from the community garden, Walter, and I started in the courtyard with grant money and donated lumber. I teach classes on herbs and companions and how to coax tomatoes into sweetness. The teenagers on the 4th floor come down to ask about propagation. The widower at the end of the hall shows up with lemonade he made from a recipe he found in his wife's church cookbook. I closed the flower shop chapter with gratitude when our owner retired and finally moved closer to her daughter in Oregon. I wrote a book with a journalist who listened to me carefully and didn't make the story more glamorous or cruel than it was. We titled it Quiet Power. A widow says no and means it. The proceeds go straight to the foundation. I still buy my jackets on sale. Every time I speak at a library or a town hall, someone raises a hand and asks me if I miss my son. I tell the truth that fits in a sentence. I miss who he was, not who he chose to be. Noah reached out 3 times in 2 years. The first time, he blamed the internet and asked me to help him sue. The second time, he sent a photo of his newborn. A little boy swaddled in a blanket with tiny planets on it. His name is Miles. The text read, as if saying his name would open a vein. The third time, he called 2 months after Sabrina left him. She took their son, half their furniture, and more than half his patience for disappointment. Mom. he said, breathless, like a plea. I don't have rent. If you ever loved me. I loved you when I changed your diapers, and when I taught you how to read, and when I clapped at your second grade play even though you forgot your lines. I told him, I love you now. That love does not pay your rent. So this is it? He asked, angry not at me but at the mirror I was holding. Your pride is more important than your grandson. My dignity is the only thing that will teach your son what love actually looks like. I answered. It has borders. It does not fund abuse. He hung up. I put the phone on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet of my apartment and the hum of the city and the strange new peace that has replaced the panic in my ribcage. I set up a college trust for Miles with Adrian's help. It will be waiting for him when he turns 18, whether he knows my name or not. That is the kind of long love I can offer, without sacrificing myself on someone else's altar. Sabrina wrote me once during the pregnancy a message without salutation or signature, as if both of those were luxuries. We're family, it said. Don't make the baby pay. I typed 3 different drafts of answers before leaving the message where it belonged and answered. Some nights, I sit with Walter and Elena and Nora at my dining table, laughing about things that have nothing to do with any of this. And then, because we are also honest and unafraid, we talk about what it means when people we love choose to be strangers. We say their names, and then we go quiet, and then we move on. Not because we are indifferent, but because sometimes moving on is what love for yourself requires. The foundation's work turned into more than I could have imagined. Sophia runs support groups where older adults practice saying sentences out loud that start with, I will not. And, you may not. And, that is not true. We teach bank managers how to notice when a customer who always came alone now arrives with a grandson who hands the teller a note. We went to the State House with a stack of case summaries and came home with draft legislation requiring banks to hold questionable transfers for 72 hours while a wellness check is performed. I sat in a committee room with my best jacket on and told a senator that help without consent is a kind of theft. He put down his pen and looked at me, as if a human had just walked onto his spreadsheet. Sometimes I go back and watch the interview with Diane, not to relive it, but to remember the feeling of my voice leaving my chest and landing exactly where I meant to send it. My favorite part isn't anything I said, it's the way Diane leans forward at the end and says, for anyone who recognizes this story, you are allowed to live in your own house, as long as you want to. The apartment Sabrina coveted is the place where I write letters and fall asleep with a book on my chest and wake to the sound of the bus brakes at the corner. I turned Noah's old room into an office and papered one wall with handwritten notes from people who heard me and wrote back. A woman from Ohio who said her daughter moved into her spare room and started accusing her of leaving the stove on when the stove was off. A man from Texas who thought his widowhood meant he owed his adult children a down payment on their happiness. A granddaughter who watched her mother rehearse how she would convince her grandmother to sign over the lake house and said, I couldn't bear it. She sent me a picture of the 2 of them fishing off the dock with their feet in the water. Do you regret any part of it? A college student asked me last month after a lecture. I regret the years I thought peace was something I could buy for the people I loved. I said, peace is what you earn when you decide your body is not a bargaining chip. When you let the people who would sell you learn how to do arithmetic without your name on their ledger. The truth is, I am not brave every day. Some days I cry into my sink. Then I wipe the counter and water the basil and call Sophia to talk through the day's caseload, and then I meet Walter downstairs to walk to the market, and then I come home and get back to work, because doing nothing is always easier than doing the next right thing, and easier never helped anyone godly. Last week, Nora knocked on my door right as the kettle screamed. She came in smiling the way she smiles when she's trying to hold two feelings at once. I got a message, she said. From Noah. I put the kettle on the back burner and turned off the flame. What did he say? That he misses you. That he didn't realize, she said, and we both let out the kind of laugh that sits between disbelief and relief. He asked if I'd seen you. If I would tell you. Will you? I asked. I'll tell him the truth, she said. That you're building a life that fits you. That you're tired of explaining your no. That you still love him. That the door is not locked, but it will not open to anyone who is not ready to wipe their feet. Good, I said. Then we sat and drank tea, and planned the next foundation workshop, and argued over whether the tomatoes were better this year or last. At the end of these lectures and interviews, there's often a question that belongs to now more than then. What would you say to someone who's in it right now? Who hasn't made the call? Who thinks tomorrow might be the day? I say, you are not a fire extinguisher for other people's lives. You are not a debt instrument. You are not selfish because your body says, stop, when someone tries to reach into your chest and adjust your heart to match their budget. I say, the first no is the hardest. It teaches your mouth its own strength. I say kindness is not compliance. Love is not limitless when it has no reciprocity. I say consequences are not cruelty. They are a language some people refuse to learn until they run out of words. Tonight, I'm at my desk finishing these pages. The city is humming outside my window, a noise that sounds like 1,000 small lives unfolding at once. On my calendar, a meeting with a state senator, a board session for the foundation, a flight to record the first in a documentary series about elder dignity and the economics of love. Before I turn off the lamp, my phone buzzes. A message from an unknown number, an image, a little boy in a striped shirt at a park, curly hair catching late sun, a grin wide enough to split the sky. Miles. He's pointing at a fountain as if he invented water. Under the photo, a single sentence. He likes to say your name. I sit there with tears running down into the corners of my mouth, and I whisper it out loud as if to teach the air itself to carry something soft in case ever, one day, it needs to lay it gently on someone's shoulder. Grandma Evie. I say, and my apartment holds the sound like a secret that doesn't hurt to keep. I don't answer. Not because I want anyone to hurt, but because I have learned that answers are doors, and not every knock deserves one. I forward the photograph to Adrian with a note. Please add this to the trust file. I send it to Nora and Walter and Alina, because joy is meant to be seen by those who safeguarded it with you. Then I do what I do every night. I wash my teacup. I turn off the light. I pull the chain on the lamp in the hall, Thomas, and I bought the year before he died. I run my hand along the bookshelf he built me. I talk to him in the voice reserved for the dead, and the living who still hold our names in their hands. Would you look at that boy? I say. And in the quiet that follows, I'm as sure as I have ever been of anything, that I did the bravest thing I have ever done the night I chose to be my own daughter, and my own mother, and my own guardian. The night I chose to be the window and not the rug. The night I said no. The night I came home. If this story met you where you are, I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Your letters sustain the work. If you want to support the Foundation's efforts, there's a way to do that. Your notes, your shares, your small kindnesses have ripple effects you'll never see. There are more stories where this one came from. If you want to walk with me through them, you know where to find me. Until the next chapter, go gently, and be as kind to yourself as you have been to everyone else.